Hello, Bama friends. It's great to be with you again as we journey deeper into the book of Ecclesiastes together on this Mother's Day. Everything is meaningless. This is the word that Solomon left us with last week. Everything is meaningless. Have you known people like that? Who just sounded like everything was some sort of downer? Because if you read Ecclesiastes wrong, like we talked about last week, you're gonna come away with it pretty depressed. And some people just choose to live that way, embrace that. Some of you will remember maybe 25 years ago, there was a character on Saturday Night Live called Debbie Downer. And no matter what anyone said, no matter the joy that was happening around her, in the end, she would say something just to bring the entire mood down, and there would just be this little sound like, wah, wah. And she was always a downer. And sometimes, if you're not clear-eyed and clear-headed, when you flip open the book of Ecclesiastes, man, it can sound a lot like that. I remember years ago in a church where I was serving, we had a member who was a school teacher. Her name was Donna, and Donna apparently didn't like anything. Like no matter what the topic was, she could come up with a way to interject some down tone or moment to it. She was always complaining about her work and what the school and school administration and the state were making her do in the classroom. She never liked to go to movies or anything because they'd always ruin the book. She would complain about how she never had any friends. And I was thinking like, I wonder why. There's real distinct memory of talking to her one Sunday morning, and she was in one of her rants about what the school was making her do and how the administration never really understood what was going on with teachers. But she also told me that one of her good friends, another teacher in her school, had just been promoted and she was going to be in the administration. And I said, well, that's got to be a pretty good thing, right? She knows what it's like. She knows what it is to be in the classroom. And then she just looked at me and she goes, well, now she's one of them. And I just thought, like you are a downer about everything. And I think that if I were to read through Donna's journal, it might sound like some of Ecclesiastes. Everything is meaningless. And so last week, we started this series that we're walking through together called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. And we're spending some time in this book listening to the wisdom of Solomon. And last week, we found out that Solomon said that everything under the sun is meaningless. And he means that very specifically, everything under the sun. All of those things that you can see, hear, smell, taste, touch, things that you can take in with your five senses. Those things are meaningless. And I know some of us want to say, and maybe rightly so, like meaningless? Really meaningless? Because that's not our experience. Even though that we know that there are some really difficult parts of life, even though we know there are some really down times, a lot of us are really positive and really optimistic. And some people who have even melancholy personalities, I have that kind of personality. Like we look around and see our lives and we see that we have better days than worse days most days. That everything can't possibly be meaningless. And we just know better, right? There's a lot about life that has meaning. I now pronounce you husband and wife. That has meaning. Congratulations, mom. Congratulations, dad. Here's your baby. That has meaning. Today we're going to celebrate your 50th wedding anniversary. That has meaning. All the kids and all the grandkids, they're coming home for the holidays. That has meaning. Like we know that there's plenty in life that has meaning. Or at least there's plenty in life that we assign meaning to. And Solomon knows this too. He knows that we assign meaning to all sorts of things, but he decides to do something with the nature of life that many of us have never had the freedom or decided to do. He decides to test it, to go out and find, to taste test all of life and find out what's meaningful. So in Ecclesiastes 2, Solomon says this. He says, I said to myself, come on, I will test you with pleasure to find what is good. But that, Solomon says, also proved to be meaningless. So you might remember last week we talked about this word meaningless. It's the Hebrew word havo. And what it means is not really meaningless. It's closer to vapor. And that's not to say that it's not real, but it's of a different kind. So my daughters have these little spray bottles, right? And if your children or you have long curly hair, man, when you need to do your hair and you need to spray some water on your hair, those bottles are not meaningless. Or in the summer, when you've been out in the yard working and it's 98 degrees, and if someone were to come up to you and spray a little spray in your face of that cold water, or maybe you put in misters on your patio and you get under that mist, that vapor that comes down, man, that's not meaningless. The problem is, it's just not permanent. It's temporary. And we don't know what to do with temporary things. So years ago, I had a life as a youth minister. And it was time for our Christmas party for our youth group at the church. And I was gonna miss a good chunk of it because I had falsely been accused of speeding. And so I had a ticket, but I was gonna fight this ticket. So I took my court date, which was at 7 p.m. on a Friday night, all the way in downtown Houston, Harris County Court. And so I said, I'm fighting this ticket because I wasn't speeding, and I know I wasn't speeding, and I'm not about to pay this ticket, and I'm not gonna sit in defensive driving and all of that. Just forget it. I'm not doing that. So another family in the church decided that they would host the Christmas party at their house. So I made the schedule, gave them everything they needed to do. And, you know, youth group Christmas party means one thing and one thing only, like pizza. And so they had pizza. And when I got to the house, after I won in court, all the kids were gone. They were out in the neighborhood on a scavenger hunt. And so it's just me and the couple who was hosting the party. And so I walk into the kitchen and I'm gonna grab me a couple slices of pizza to eat. And so I do pick up the disposable plate, put my pizza on it, eat. And then I go, when I'm done, to throw it in the trash. And she stops me, whoa, 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 whoa. Those go over here. And she takes this red plastic plate from me and sets it on a stack. Well, now I see with all of these other dirty red plastic plates. And she could tell that I was curious about why she was doing this. And she says, a lot of people don't know this, but you can put these in the dishwasher and wash them to use them again. And so I thought, you're putting disposable dishes in your dishwasher? Do we need to have a discussion about what disposable means? She was holding on to things that were meant to be, that were designed to be temporary. How many things in your life are you holding on to that were designed to be temporary? Now, maybe not you, maybe a friend. But I bet someone in your life could come over to your house and walk through all of your closets and everything that you have and probably ask you, like, why are you holding on to that? But here's the question that Solomon wants us to ask. Like, if you're holding on to physical things that are temporary, what kind of mental, emotional, and spiritual things are you holding on to that were meant to be temporary? So Solomon says further on, he says, laughter is madness, in verse 2. And what does pleasure accomplish? He says, I tried pleasure. I tried cheering myself with wine, embracing folly. My mind still guiding my wisdom, though. So Solomon's saying, like, I tried wine, but I only got a little drunk. That's literally what he's saying. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. We've all tried this. Like we have all tried to find meaning in pleasure. Do you remember that trip you took and you tried to find some meaning in it? Or maybe you were at a bad spot in your relationship and you thought like something like a trip would do the trick, or a dinner out. You tried to fix something with pleasure. Do you remember that dessert you had, that great dessert, the chocolate thing with the chocolate on top and the icing of chocolate and some chocolate on the side, and that felt really good, but you know, like after it was like only like a chocolatey regret because you just ate 5 days worth of calories just in dessert. It just didn't last. Solomon says it's vapor. It's real. Pleasurable experiences are real. You shouldn't avoid them. They're not bad. They just don't last. It's vapor. It's a plastic dish. Then Solomon looks for something else in verse 4. He looks at work. And this is what he says. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. So now Solomon says, maybe work will solve the problem. And if there's ever been a culture that believed that work would give us meaning, man, it's ours. Some of us define ourselves by our work. That I did that, I'm this, I got this degree, I got this title, this is how much I make. And some of us, we define ourselves so much by it that we define other people by the work we think they do or they don't do. That they're better or they're worse because they've got that degree or they've got this title or they've made this much money, or, you know, they're not really into working. They just want a handout. They don't want to work. We think work is meaningful in a way that Solomon tells us doesn't give you meaning. It's vapor. And I remember when I was in my late and mid 20s, I used to love going to bookstores. Do you guys remember? You remember bookstores, like not just the big boxes like Barnes and Noble. I love them all. Like Books A Million, Walden Books in the Mall, B. Dalton. I would spend hours and hours and hours and hours in bookstores. And eventually I would find my way up to the front where they had just this bin of discount books. And I wanted to write books at that time in my life. This is just something I felt like God had put on my heart to do, to minister to people in that way. But I always got nervous when I looked at that bargain books bin, because I knew, like, man, when this person got this contract to write this book, when this book was published, they were on top of the world. It was part of a dream that they had had for years and years and years, and they were super excited about it. And now all of their work was in the discount bin. And I remember really clearly my first major project, which was the Voice Bible. But before the full Bible came out, we did smaller individual projects, and mine was called the Voice of Psalms. So when people ask me what part of I had to do with it, it's in the Voice of Psalms. And I was so excited when that book came out. It had my name in it. We had a placard of it, put into a frame, hung on the wall in our house. And when that book came out, to buy it cost $15.99. I checked a few weeks ago. You could buy the Voice of Psalms for $1.67. It just didn't last. Like, it never lasts. Those things don't last. As a matter of fact, when that book came out, I was presenting at Abilene Christian University, and we actually got a box of them before the presentation, before it was actually released. Like, the publisher rushed them out so that we could have a whole box for people to buy a week before it actually came out. And to this day, the place where you're most likely to find extra copies of the Voice of Psalms is the campus store at Abilene Christian University. I'm proud of that work. It was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of beautiful work. It's blessed a lot of people. I would do the whole thing again. $15.99 to $1.67. It just doesn't last. Then Solomon says, I'll try and be wise. Maybe meaning is found in wisdom. While other people are out being foolish, I'll be wise. So in verse 15 of chapter 2, he says, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? The fate of the fool is going to overtake him. They're going to have the same fate, the wise and the foolish. I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have come already when both have been forgotten. The days have come already where both will be forgotten, the wise and the foolish. And when I tell people, I wrote this in my book, 40 Days on Being a Three. Like there have been 46 presidents of the United States. And for most of that time, whoever was the president of the United States was the most powerful person, not just in the country, but in the world. For most of that time. Influence beyond influence beyond influence. And I would bet you that off the top of your head, you couldn't name half of them. The wise and the foolish, the successful, the unsuccessful, the beautiful, the ugly. Doesn't matter. We all suffer the same fate. We will not be remembered. And then Solomon really gives us the gut punch. Like the fool, the wise too must die. And so much in the book of Ecclesiastes is driving at this central idea. Hey, we're all going to die. Solomon says, here's what I've experienced in life. Here's what you'll experience in life. Pleasure doesn't last. Your work doesn't last. Your wisdom doesn't last. And so in verse 17, Solomon says, when I realized that all that was in the mix, I knew. He says, so I hated life. When you find out all of those things that we were chasing, all those things we were pursuing, don't last. We hated life. Here's the deal. Here's what Solomon does. Solomon tries to do everything right, tries to have pleasure, but it doesn't last. It doesn't go far. He chooses wisdom. He works hard. And when he discovers that all of that doing right doesn't last, he hates life. And the word for that, for when we hate life because it didn't work out the way that we wanted it to work out, the word for that is resentment. And you've been there. Because deep down inside of us, we believe that doing right, whatever that means for you, whether it means following the rules or following the Bible, doing what your parents expect you to do, doing what the boss says, we found out that all of that doing right doesn't make us immune to life. So we hated life because we thought that if we did it right, if we did all the right things, dotted the I's, crossed all the T's, then we would get preferential treatment. It's like we've got these scales. And we figure that if we put enough of good deeds on one side of the scale, then that will keep us over here where we just can't experience the ups and downs and the tragedies of life. But it doesn't work that way. So we hate life. And Ecclesiastes, fortunately, it fortunately presents us with the very first step that we need to take. Verse 24, Solomon says, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil. One of the reasons that you and I come to a place of resentment in life is because we can't get no satisfaction. We are searching so desperately for perfection. We are searching so desperately for success. We are searching so desperately for acknowledgement and accomplishment. We want to be better than our neighbors. We want to win at political fights. We want all of those things, and all of them keep us unsatisfied. It moves us away from contentment. Do you know what satisfaction is? Satisfaction is, I did my best, and that's good enough. And in the coming weeks, we're going to see why that's the case. But so many of us need to say to ourselves, say to our spouses, say to our children, that what's expected here, whether it's at school, at work, as a parent, as a child, as a church leader, as a school teacher, as an accountant, as a lawyer, whatever it is, I did my best, and that's enough. We have been trying so hard to hold on to plastic dishes. We are trying to keep a hold of temporary things. And when something is made to be temporary, there is no path to make it eternal. There's no way to make it permanent. Look at all the stuff that you're trying to hold on to. Do you really want to go through life just saying to yourself and saying to God, God, I'm just going to keep washing these plastic dishes, keep holding on to things that I should let go of. I'm going to keep spraying this bottle and balancing the scales and thinking that if I invest more in the temporary, then one day I'll have meaning? Solomon says, all of the things that you're chasing, all the things that I'm chasing, the reason that they are vapor is because they were never meant to be more than vapor. But for you, only you can decide and discern what those things are. And once you do, I think, Solomon thinks, you'll find satisfaction. God, help us be people who find contentment and satisfaction in you, the only thing that is eternal, which makes all the things which are eternal, eternal, and has placed everything in its time, some to be temporary and useful, and others to pass when you move us on. And so, God, share with us your discernment about what in our lives is eternal and what we can let go of. And we ask for these things in Jesus' name. Amen.